Thank you, Anne-Lise. And now is the question and answer part of the program. So I want to ask you a little bit about, well, a couple of things that I think were remarkable about your research. But I think I want to get you to reiterate the point about the very stereotype. I mean, I think one of the things we found most fascinating about the results, in fact, I didn't believe them for the longest time, and she had to keep doing it over and over and over again, was this repetition. So can you talk a little bit about that repetition and what that looked like and the ghost boxes?
Yes. So as you can see kind of from the videos, they tended to start on that outer, and they would pick a side. So either they went 1, 2, 3, 4, or they went 4, 3, 2, 1. And it was remarkably systematic. They really chose a start location and a direction of travel. And it was to the point where they had those ghost boxes, so I tracked the 0 spot and the 5 spot, because that could indicate of forgetting that there was only 4 boxes. They were such in the trance that they just kind of went on autopilot. They automized this task, which is something that we didn't see in the primate data. So looking at the set breaking, that would tell, so the least favorite reward for dogs, not a single time was it ever in 2 or 3. It was always in 1 or 4. But in the monkeys, it could be 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Yeah, whichever one was the least likely.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was really. But I think the key is that it can be very efficient.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And very systematic.
Why use a more demanding cognitive process when your goal is just to find the cookie? Yeah. And if you could do this very little thinking, and as you saw with data, he did speed demon approach. He just powered through.
While you were doing this research, we actually the lab got involved with another researcher, and so I thought I'd ask you a little bit about work. One of the things that are important to me, as I mentioned, is comparative work. And so we brought this over from a big literature using this kind of test in primates to dogs, and we also have a colleague who's working with parrots. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what she's found with the parrots?
So there was another researcher at UC Davis who did the Hamilton search with parrots, and she used it also as assessment of personality. So could you test those 5 dimensions of personality as she made personality assessments for these parrots, and did it predict the performance on the Hamilton search, the set breaking, and she also did the forced set breaking. So
you talked a little bit about, I thought I'd get you to expand a little bit on some of the future directions, and because I think there's a lot of neat ways to go. But so I'm interested in what, again, if you want to expand a little bit on your future directions, but also sort of, if it's purely speculation, I think, but what are the implications for this, for dogs, or for dog training, or for applying it, I guess, to whatever extent you can at this point?
Well, given that search strategies are something that we train the dogs to do today, they are performing jobs that are functioning for human society. You have bomb sniffing dog, you have other search related behaviors, and understanding how the dogs approach it. What is their natural, less influenced than training approach? So they got to go through the different protocol. They started with just 2 buckets and to 4, and I was standing behind them the entire time. So they got to choose their own search strategy compared to an artificial one that we would do via training. And so understanding what is their natural tendencies, and then again, how can we override the dissociative process? That became such a stereotyped response going through those buckets to the point where my personal dogs, as I was setting up for another dog, they completed the testing, so they were allowed to freely be in the area, and they would go back and forth. At one point, I had all 3 of them going back and forth with no reward. The extinction of that stereotype response was extremely long.
It was funny, before Anne-Lise started, I had another student who just piloted the very beginnings of this, and he was playing around in a big room with 4 buckets, very similar buckets, but the pattern, do you put them 4 in a row or what? And he was the one who first got a hint, just a few dogs, got a hint about this very systematic approach, because he put the 4 buckets in a circle, which means the dog just starts going around and around and around and around, and you can just stand there watching the dog just searching all around in the circle till you stop them on it. Of your future directions, which is most interesting to you? I mean, sort of given your interest in how they've developed as you've matured as a researcher, where would you most like to go with this research if you moved on with it?
I would say probably in the area of social learning. So what are the things that we can do to influence the speeding up of the cueing into it, as well as looking at the different breeds. So are there breeds of dogs who are going to be more influenced by the social learning than others?
Do you think, it's a tease to have had dubs in there? It was a lot
Right.
of fun to have dubs. You had a lot of publicity on campus for having dubs
Yes.
in your research program. But it's sort of interesting because it's only one of
It's
that
only one.
breed, but that point is way out there on a couple of those data points. So can you come up with a rationale given that Malamutes are, and it's a Malamute, right?
Yes. It's a Malamute.
I know the mascot is a husky, but Malamutes look more like huskies than, never mind.
They can handle a stadium environment a lot better
the
than a
stadium
husky.
environment, yeah.
So-
yeah. So, there's certainly, in that category of ancient breeds from Elaine Ostrander's work and so on. So do you think there's a relationship there somehow?
There could very well be a relationship with what were they bred to do. Is it going to be this kind of more routine oriented? And this is something that we see across canines. So although Hamilton search hasn't been done in wolves or other canine species, they have done radial mazes and other search strategies that kind of are further spaced out in a circle type thing, and they see the same systematic approach. So this could be a more ancient trait, and are these modern European breeds that are all shapes and sizes, do we see the same approach?
So you'd like to get your hands on some wolves and some coyotes too, I bet.
Yes.
You are indeed looking for a PhD program now,
Yes.
and so I thought, what's your interest now? I know you've turned in a couple of NSF proposals, and so you've developed some new interests. So why don't we tell people about some of the newer things you've gotten interested in?
So I got involved in the world of animal behavior through my experience of training and showing dogs. So my primary interests do land in the applied sense of how can we understand what we are doing with them and how we can better optimize what we are doing with them. And so understanding cognition as well as then social behavior. And then as I have graduated from my undergrad, I've also continued with training as well as managing a dog daycare. So that is where I'm surrounded by very complex and interesting social behaviors of dogs, so social interactions have also increased, especially when it comes to conflict behavior and how we can minimize such conflicts. Because of the prevalence of dogs in households, we don't want them fighting all the time, and people are increasing the number of dogs in a smaller area, and now they're competing over space, which whenever you're competing over resource, you're going to see an increase of conflicts. So areas of that, as well as I'm still interested in cognitive work.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Good. That's it. Thank you very much.